The worst of Netflix original movies. The rules are simple. I find a Netflix original movie. I look up its rating on IMDB and Rotten Tomatoes. If it has less than a 5 out of 10 on IMDB and less than a 50% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, then it qualifies for a viewing, and we discover if the low ratings were deserved or not. With the rules explained, it's time to start the show. So for our debut episode of this brand new series I'm going to do, we are starting off with a American-Canadian supernatural horror movie called I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. This was written and directed by Osgood Perkins. It stars Ruth Wilson, Bob Balaban, Lucy Boynton, and Paula Prentice. And the logline is this. A nervous nurse who scares easily finds herself caring for an ailing horror novelist while living in a house with hidden secrets. The IMDb rating for this movie is 4.6 out of 10. And the Rotten Tomatoes audience score is 24%. So this qualifies. Like I said in the rules in the opening, I go by audience score, not by critic score, because we all know critic score is pretty biased and just kind of crappy. So we go by audience score. So the audience score is 24%. Ooh, this does not look good. So at this point in time, I haven't watched the movie yet. I also have not looked at any of the reviews. I just looked at the ratings, but I didn't see what people had to say about the movie. So I have no idea why it got the score that it did. My thoughts are going to be this. A supernatural horror movie. Judging by the premise, it seems like it's going to take place in a single location. So with that, like, you don't really need a high budget. So I'm assuming the budget isn't the reason for the low rating. I'm assuming it's not like a budget issue. I'm going to guess that either the scares aren't really scary. Maybe it's just a bunch of jump scares, which are the weakest scares ever when it comes to horror movies. Or I'm going to guess that the twist doesn't make any sense. The reason for the horror doesn't make any sense. Maybe the characters are just unlikable. I don't know about having a character who's afraid of everything being in a horror movie. That seems kind of redundant, but I guess we'll see. Judging by the fact that she is a maid taking care of a horror writer, I'm assuming that his writing is going to come into play. So I'm guessing maybe whatever he writes comes to fruition, or maybe he's writing about something that already happened. Maybe his writing gives people like the ghost or the demon or whatever power, like the evil power, or maybe he's the evil itself. I guess we'll find out. So yeah, I think it's time to just jump right in and give this a watch. And I will be right back once the watch through is done. And welcome back. I know for you guys it's only been a matter of seconds because obviously I cut out a huge chunk. But for me it's been about 2 hours. So I just finished watching the movie and I gave it about half an hour to just kind of let it digest in my brain. Now let's talk about it. So like pretty much all my videos, I don't script anything. So I'm just shooting from the hip here. We'll see how this goes. I'm going to just kind of give a brief summary of the movie. Kind of like anyone who's watched my Trust A videos, it's going to be like that, only I'm not going to break down every single scene because, I mean, this is different from a TV episode because this is a lot longer. So I'm just going to kind of give like a brief overview of what happened in the movie. So of course there are going to be spoilers. And then we'll get right into it and pick apart the story and the narrative and stuff. I've thought about showing scenes, like just little clips from the movie, but I don't know how YouTube is, because YouTube seems to be very finicky when it comes to that, even if it's like for a review, even if it's just for a few seconds. So maybe I'll just do what I did with Trust A and I'll just show like screenshots. But yeah, okay, so brief summary of the movie. So it takes place in this remote house in Massachusetts that's owned by Iris Blum. She is a retired horror writer. She's in her, I don't know, 70s, 80s, whatever, and she kind of suffers from dementia. And our main character, played by Ruth Wilson, is Lily Saylor. And Lily is a hospice nurse. So she comes in and she basically takes care of Blum. That's her job. And she lives in this place by herself. The only other character that shows up is Mr. Waxcap. And he's the estate manager of the place. Basically, Blum has no family, no kids, no one to pass the house on to. Bea, instead, in her will, the house is going to go to another prominent horror writer in her family. So we get Lily. She, like the summary said, is easily scared. And on the very first night, she is talking to someone we don't know. We don't even hear the other side of the conversation. She's just on the phone because she's scared. It's like, nerves, first night nerves, and she just wants someone to talk to. And as she's talking, we see the phone cord slowly get dragged up until eventually the phone gets yanked out of her hands. And yeah, she freaks out. And later on, she sees a black spot. Basically, it's like mold on a wall. And as the months go by, the mold slowly starts growing. And there's also another little moment where we see, I guess this was supposed to be scary, but it really wasn't. It's just something like, if you kind of notice it, then you notice it. But if you don't, then whatever. So this house is 2 stories. Blum always stays on the second floor. She has dementia and stuff. She never comes down. Lily moves throughout the house because she's able-bodied. At the bottom of the stairs is a rug. And in the corner of the rug is flipped up. And Lily constantly has to push it down. So if you really think into it, you think, why is that corner of the rug always flipped open if Lily's the only one that walks downstairs who's flipping the rug? And that's supposed to be, I guess, some kind of creepy thing. But unless you actually pay attention, it can easily go over people's heads and you just completely miss it. So I guess that's kind of like a little, not scare, but a little horror moment or whatever that's kind of wasted. So yeah, we just get moments of Lily going about her day being this hospice nurse. Iris Blum, she always refers to Lily as Polly, and she has no idea why. Even when she tells her, my name is Lily. So one time, Mr. Waxcap arrives because Lily calls him to tell him about the mold to see if maybe they can have someone come in and fix it, especially since it's been growing bigger. And Mr. Waxcap kind of ignores it. And then eventually Lily asks, who's Polly? Because Iris Blum always refers to me as Polly. And usually, when it comes to dementia patients, sometimes things like this can happen, but they're usually referring to someone who was very dear to them. And Mr. Waxcap says, well, she has no family or anything like that. Polly is the name of the protagonist in Iris's most popular novel, The Lady in the Walls. And Lily's like, all right, well, what's it about? And Mr. Waxcap is like, oh, well, just read it. And Lily explains, I scare easily. I don't want to read it. Can you just tell me? He's like, oh, well, there's a kind of cheaply adapted movie if you want to watch. And she's like, no, that would just make it worse. Can't you just tell me? And he just completely ignores her and leaves. So I was like, all right, I guess she's going to have to find out for herself. So she starts trying to read the novel, and she scares easily, so she kind of gives up on that pretty quickly. And I thought this was kind of interesting was the fact that we have a scene where she's trying to read it, and it's nighttime. And I'm like, if you're easily scared and you didn't want to read this novel because you know you'd be scared, why are you going to read it at night? Why not just wait and read it in the daytime, to make it less scary? But whatever. So that happens. And as she's reading this, it's implied that Iris actually knew Polly, and that Polly was retelling her story to Iris, and Iris was writing it down. So The Lady in the Walls is not necessarily a work of fiction, but actually based off of true events. And we get a flashback to the 1800s, I'm assuming, based off the dress, where we see Polly walking around in, I'm assuming, her wedding dress with the black blindfold on, and she's just watching, going through the empty house as this man watches her. And then we cut back to the present day where Lily, we see her making, she's washing fruits and stuff like that, when all of a sudden she notices that the black mold is appearing on her arm. And as she's looking at her arm, the mold gets bigger, and her arm start getting bloated, and they start looking really weird. And all of a sudden, she hears a noise, and she looks away, and then when she looks back at her arms are normal. So I guess that's supposed to be like a freaky moment. I didn't really find this moment scary, just because I mean it was freaky when you saw like the mold and stuff. I wouldn't say freaky, but like that was a little bit more chilling. But then once you saw the comically looking arms being all bloated, then it just like, I just kind of like chuckled to myself. I was like, all right, you just kind of completely tossed away your scare right there. It would have been a lot better if you just saw the mold and it looked like you know, her arm is kind of rotting. Like that would have looked better than the bloated arms. The bloated arms just look comical. It looks like the actress was basically wearing a fat suit on her arms. It looked weird. But yeah, anyways, nothing really happens. That's the thing in this movie. This movie feels like, and it's only an hour and 27 minutes long, but it feels like it's too long. If that makes any sense. It feels like this movie should have been like 20 minutes, 30 minutes top. Like this should have been a short film, but it got stretched into not even a feature length, because feature length is, well, I guess, yeah, feature length. Feature length is about hour and 30. Nowadays it's about an hour and 45 minutes, but this is just under an hour and 30. Yeah, so we get moments where just things just kind of drag out, nothing really happens, and so we get some more of that until we eventually come across a moment where Lily's like, you know what, like this mole's getting bigger, I'm gonna call someone. So she calls someone, like, hey, like, can you come down and rip open this wall and see what's going on, if it's the plumbing or whatever. And the person's like, well, yeah, we can do that. We can come in on Monday. Did you check yourself? Like, did you see if, like, you know, there's like a leaking pipe somewhere or whatever? We don't hear this side of the conversation because we only ever see Lily talking on the phone. We never actually see the people on the other side. So I thought because of that, like this was going somewhere else, but no. So she decides to search. So she looks inside the laundry room, and then she looks in the room right next to the laundry room. It's like a little storage room, and inside she sees a moldy cardboard box that has the word Polly on it. So she pulls it out, opens inside, and she sees what looks like handwritten rough drafts of the lady in the walls. And that's when we get another flashback. So we see Polly still blindfolded, walking through the house, using her hands to kind of feel the surroundings, when all of a sudden she pricks her finger on something, and her finger starts bleeding. And so she pulls up her blindfold, and she sees that one of the walls, the boards, has been pulled open, and it's the same area where the mold is growing. And she looks at her husband, kind of confused, and then her husband plunges her in the back of the head. And then we cut to the walls covered in blood, and her husband's nailing the boards back. So it's pretty much implied that he bludgeoned his wife to death, he bludgeoned Polly to death, and then stuffed her body in the walls, and he's boarding it up. And that's the end of the flashbacks. So we have no idea why he did this. We have no, I mean, he even looked sad while he was doing this. So why he decided to bludgeon his wife to death and then store her body in the walls, who knows? We have no idea. It's never explained. But anyways, we cut back to the present. She's like brushing Iris's hair, and she's kind of, Iris mentions the name Polly again, and then Lily tries to explain, like who, you know, why do you keep calling me Polly? Like, my name is Lily. I come from, and then she gives her address, and then Iris gets really angry. And basically she's talking to Polly, but she's talking to Lily as if Lily's Polly. And she's saying, like, you know, like, why did you abandon me? Like, why did you leave me behind? Everything, like, even the prettiest things rot. Your ghost, like, you used to come and you used to visit me, and you used to whisper in my ear, and you used to tell me your story. But then it came to a point where, like, you couldn't even look at yourself. Like, you kept turning your back to me. You kept turning your back to everything. And it got to the point where you would come into a room, and your feet were facing one way and your head was facing the other. And then later that night, Iris and Lily are watching TV. Lily kind of falls asleep. Iris does a little, you know, as well. And then Lily wakes up to, like, some kind of, like, mysterious sound. It sounds almost like a knocking sound almost. And Lily goes, and she goes down the hallway. She flicks on the lights, and she hears, like, the sounds coming from downstairs. So she walks downstairs, and she notices that the carpet is flipped again. So she flips it back, and then she looks and she sees that the boards on the wall with the mold are gone. And she's freaking out, like, who the hell removed these boards? And she kind of looks in and she sees something. We don't really see what, like, I don't know if it's just the way it's shot. It's kind of hard to make out what exactly we're seeing. I'm guessing it's bones, but pretty much we're seeing like the rotten body of Polly, which begs the question: if Polly was stuffed in this wall in the 1800s, and we're in the we're in the 20th century at this point, because there's mentions of airplanes. We obviously see cars, when Lily shows up. There's telephones. They're watching a movie or a TV show on a TV. So there's electricity and stuff like that. Did no one ever notice the horrible smell coming from the walls? Like, it's not like she was buried under the ground or anything like that. Like, she's buried in the walls. And the walls, it's just some thin wood panels that's bordering up these walls. Did no one at any point in time in the past century smell this dead body rotting away in the walls? Like, I'm kind of finding that hard to believe. Yeah, anyways, Lily starts kind of like panicking. She starts searching the house, and then we see this comical moment where we see Polly's ghost with her head facing, basically her body's facing one way and her legs facing the other way, and she's walking behind Lily. Lily's walking around the room. She's not really seeing anything. She hears a noise. She turns around, and Polly's ghost is right in front of her. And then we see Lily like freak out. And then the next moment, we see Lily's body laying on the floor. So Lily died of a heart attack. Then we have this weird moment where we have like the mechanic or whoever was going to show up to check on the walls. He shows up. He knocks on the door, but no one's there. And then we see Lily, and Lily's walking down the stairs, and she notices her dead body on the floor, and then she just kind of looks at the door, and she doesn't answer, so the guy leaves. And then days later, Mr. Waxcap shows up, and he discovers the dead body of Lily and Iris, and the cops arrive, and they take the bodies away. And then we get a voiceover from Lily that matches the exact same voiceover in the beginning. And in the very beginning of the movie, we see basically it's like a camera panning through the house, and we see like kids sleeping in bed. And I was kind of wondering, like, what was the point of the kids? Because there's no kids throughout this entire movie. And then you find out why, because at the very end, you see the kids again. And this is basically the new owners of the house. And Lily, I forgot the exact quote, but it's something like, when someone dies in the house, they never truly go away. You don't own the house. You're just borrowing it from the ghosts that live there. I am the pretty thing that lives in this house, and I'm allowing you to borrow this. Or something like that. And so we basically see that Lily's ghost is now in this house, and she's watching this family, and there you go. That's the end. So here's the thing. At first I thought, okay, Lily is the ghost. Lily is Polly. Lily is, because in the movie we have Iris at a point mentions that Lily can't accept the fact that she's dead, in a sense. Like, she just can't let go. She has to stay behind. And like it gets to the point where even her body is different, where her face and her body faces one way, but her legs face the other. And when she walks, she doesn't see what's in front of her, only what's behind her. Basically, I'm assuming that it's a metaphor for, like, she can't let go of the past. She can't look towards the future because she's always looking at the past. So I thought, okay, so that means that Lily is Polly. And Lily is like making up this whole identity or whatever because she can't let go and accept the fact that she's gone. So she's trying to live a life, but she just can't. But then it's like, no, that all gets thrown out. And the thing is, like, it even sets up for this because we have a scene like when she's making her phone call the first night. After she finishes dialing the last number on a rotary phone, she like pricks her finger or whatever, and she kind of sucks on the finger for a bit. And later on in one of the flashbacks, we see Polly pricking her finger in the exact same spot, and that's what causes her to open up the blindfold and see the unboarded walls. So it's kind of like a callback to that. And then we saw the mold on the walls, the mold on the box that contains Polly's stuff, and then we saw the mold on Lily's arms. like she's rotting away. So that's what I thought. Like everything seems to hint. And then you also get the fact that Iris keeps referring to Lily as Polly and nothing else. And there's even a part where she dresses down Lily as if she's Polly and explaining like, you abandoned me. You need to remember that even the prettiest things eventually rot. Like you can't keep like you have to face what happened. So all this seems to point to the fact that Lily is Polly. But no, because at the end, Polly kills Lily by scaring her to death. So what was the point in setting all these setups to make it look like Lily was Polly? See, here's the thing. Other than Mr. Waxcap and Iris, Lily doesn't talk to anybody. Or at least she calls two people on the phone, but we never see their side of the conversation. We never see them on the phone. We never hear anything that they say. So this could have been like an interesting thing where it's almost like the Sixth Sense, where, Lily is calling, but there's no one on the other line. Like you could have even had a moment where like we get a flashback or whatever, and we see that we have like the dead tone, phone tone while Lily's on the phone, but she's having a conversation with no one that's actually there. You could have done something like that. I mean, I know it's not anything original because again, Sixth Sense did that already, but that's what it seemed like it was hinting that this was doing. Like this was basically going to be like the Sixth Sense meets Stir of Echoes, the Kevin Bacon movie with the dead woman in the floorboards. I assumed that that's where this was going, but no. Instead, it gives all the clues that that's what it is, and then at the very end, it's just like, nope, Lily was just a regular human being who just acted abnormal because that's just the way she is. And by that I mean Lily is slow as hell when it comes to everything. That's another thing. I feel like this should have been like a shorter movie. Like when it comes to like when we have a scene where Lily's walking down the stairs, it literally takes like almost 2 minutes for her to walk down the stairs and go to the door. Every little thing she does, like there's a scene where she's like opening up the cardboard box and she opens up another little box inside and sees like the rough drafts of the Lady in the Walls, and she's slowly doing everything. She slowly cuts open the box and opens the flaps and pulls out the box inside and opens up the lid of that box, and she sees the papers, and she slowly reaches down, and one by one, you get where I'm going with this? Like she's taking her sweet ass time doing everything, which makes her seems a little like abnormal. So I was thinking maybe this is a ghost trying to be human again, but it's been so long that she doesn't really know how. So once again, pointing to Lily being Polly. But no, that's just the way Lily is. Lily's not Polly. Polly's not Lily. They're completely separate people. Polly's ghost scares Lily and Lily dies. And then who knows what happens to Polly after that. But now Lily's ghost is inside this house and she's watching the new family. Maybe she's watching the new family with Polly's ghost. Who knows? We don't ever find out about that. Well, we also don't ever find out why her husband killed Polly. That's never revealed. So there you go. It just me. I can understand the ratings. I can really see why. And it's kind of a shame because I feel like this director, he know that there are certain points at this that's pretty good. Well, first off, let's just say acting. Acting is good overall, except Ruth Wilson, she's Lily. She pretty much carries this entire movie because she's the main focal point. Like even Iris Blum, who's like the second most seen character in this, is only in it for like a few minutes. Like it's mostly just Ruth Wilson on her own. So I think she did a good job, minus the fact that she takes too long to do everything, which would have made perfect sense if she was actually Polly. Like if she was Polly, a ghost who's been dead for over a century, trying to become a human or trying to live a human life because they can't accept the fact that they're dead. But it's been so long since they've been humans that they don't really know how. So they're kind of trying to mimic how a human would act and a human would do things, but doing it slowly. That would have made perfect sense, but it's not. So I don't know if there was like an original ending and it just got changed or what. Yeah, I'll give a pass to the acting. The acting is fine. The directing, for the most part, is fine. Like the way the cinematography and stuff is set up. I liked how there's not like a bunch of jump cuts. There's not a bunch of jump scares. I know I gave a negative that scenes dragged on, but it can work for a horror movie. As like there will be like one camera shot, and we'll hold on that camera shot for a while, and that's not a bad thing, especially when you're trying to draw out tension. It's, in my opinion, it's a lot better to have a single shot that goes on for just a little bit too long, rather than a bunch of cuts. Cut from here to here to here to here to here to here. So I love that part, but the thing is with that, the writing needs to hold up. So you can have the cinematography, like scenes kind of drag and scenes be kind of slow and quiet, but the writing has to make up for some of that. Instead, we have these shots that kind of drag. They're slow, they're quiet, whatever you want to call it. But there's nothing going on in the shots. And there's nothing on the scene to grab our attention. So it's just, it feels like the director's like, oh crap, I have like 30 minutes worth of story and I have to fit it into an hour and 30 minutes. So let's just drag out scenes for as long as we can for no other reason than to just fill up time. That's what it feels like. We're just filling up a bunch of time. I think if there was a better story, then the directing would have made this better. No, how do I phrase this? I think Osgood did a good job on directing. I think he did a poor job on the writing. I think he had something there with the writing, but he needed some other, maybe just someone else to come in and just rewrite a little bit and polish things up a bit more and kind of give more oomph to the story, because it feels like, again, you took a short story and you dragged it out into a feature length and you don't have anything to really grip us. And so these long quiet scenes just don't work, because it's not like a slow burn where the tension is building and something happens. It's just a slow burn and nothing ever happens. So it's kind of like you're just blue balling your audience. And then again, the production on the ghosts, I just didn't find it creepy at all. The things that were creepy were the moments that you didn't try too hard to be scary, if that makes any sense. So seeing Polly's ghost didn't freak me out whatsoever. But having Lily come down and seeing the board, like the wall opened up, and the boards just calmly set down, leaning against the open wall, that is kind of creepy. I think the carpet being flipped could have been creepy if you brought more attention to it. If you have her, like Lily, maybe after like the second or third time she does that, she's kind of just like confused, like, how does this keep getting flipped open? Like what's maybe this would have been great right here actually. So have the carpet flipped, have Lily flip it back down, strain the carpet out, go back upstairs. Maybe she's brushing her teeth or whatever, and she hears creaking from down below, like someone's walking on the first floor. And she stops, she turns on the lights, she walks down the stairs, and she sees that the carpet is flipped again. That would have made the carpet flipping like more creepy, because it's like you heard the first steps, you saw the thing flip. Maybe like Lily looks at the carpet flipped, she kind of looks around, she doesn't see anything. She flips it back down. She goes back upstairs. Maybe she peeks into Iris's room to see if Iris has somehow gone up, but Iris is sleeping in bed. So it's kind of like, okay, what was that noise? What was creeping down on the first floor that caused the carpet to flip up? There you go. You don't have to show anything. You don't have to show any ghosts. You don't have to have any freaky ghost screams or whisperings or anything like that. Just little creaks, like someone's walking on the first floor, and then there you go. Like that's a scare that's so simple and easy and takes no budget whatsoever. There was another good moment where Lily is trying to get the TV to work, and it's just static after static after static. And then there's one scene where like she flicks and it's like a blank screen, and she sees Polly in the background watching Lily over her shoulder, and Lily turns around and there's nothing there. I mean, that's a cliche horror scare. It's kind of like the whole, someone's brushing their teeth and then you just see a figure dash across the hallway behind them. Like, it's cliche, but it works, and it worked in here. The mold on the arms, worked at first. Like when she just looked at her arms and she just saw like that her arms like looked moldy and like almost like they were rotting. And then once he started having it started to get bloated, that's when the scare just went out the window. So it's almost like you're trying too hard to do some of these scares when the simpler task would have just made things even more scary. Just have the rot on her arms and she's kind of like freaking out. She's looking at it. She hears a noise. She looks up. Maybe Iris like rings the bell or calls her name or whatever. And she looks up, and then when she looks back down at her arms are normal again without the rot. I would have completely got rid of the bloated effect because that just looks like the actress is wearing a fat suit on her arms. It completely took out the horror aspect of it. But those were the only 3 horror moments in this, and they weren't really horrifying. It was just more of like this. It was more of like a setup for a horror that never paid off. So the mold, okay, that's creepy. It's not like a horrifying, scary event where I'm like, oh my god. But it's just more like, oh, where's that's kind of creepy, but where's it going? Thing on the TV, that's kind of it's a cliche, but it's a good little scare. And then the missing floorboards. I mean the missing boards on the wall. Like that was kind of creepy. But then you completely got rid of the creep factor by having Lily walking off camera, and then you see Polly's hilariously looking ghost following after her. Yeah, it's a horror movie that wants to have a slow burn towards the horror, which is great, but it just never goes anywhere. Never pays off. The scares are, I don't even want to say, they're not really scares. There's only 3 big moments that are actually kind of creepy, and they happen way too quickly. Like it's like you blink and it's already done. So they're way too fast, and the story just kind of dies out. It looks like it's going one way, and you have all the elements building towards it going that way, and then you just completely go nope. Like I said before, you have all the elements of it building towards Lily's actually Polly, and then you just completely is like nope. Lily and Polly are actually 2 different people, and Polly scares Lily to death, and now Lily's in the house, and Lily's the ghost. So Lily takes over Polly's role. I was like, all right, whatever. That kind of sucked. So, yeah. Once again, this movie got a 4.6 out of 10 on IMDb and a 24% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. And I will have to say that the audience, the viewers got it right. I would agree with those scores. It just there's something in here that it could have been really good, but it just never lives to its full potential, which is a shame. Because like I said, like the music, the sound, the audio in this is good. Minus the fact that it's like an ASMR. This is like an ASMR horror because Lily talks way too quiet. She's constantly whispering. We have like voiceover of her throughout the movie. And the voiceover is not that bad. It's actually pretty well written, but she just talks so quiet that I had to kind of like strain to hear, and I even had to go back and listen again. And it's like I'm watching this without any without the subtitles on. It is an English movie, but sometimes when I watch Netflix, I'll put on, the closed caption. Not because I have any problems hearing, but just so I can, in case like my attention drifts or whatever, I can see exactly what the character's saying. Because you also get the moments where in movies where it's like the dialogue is very low, but then the action scenes are very high and loud, which always bugs the crap out of me. So I have to keep sometimes the movies low so that the action scenes aren't blowing out my eardrums, but then it makes it really hard to make out what people are saying. So sometimes I'll have to have subtitles on so I can just read what people are saying. But I didn't want the subtitles to prevent me from having any scares. Because sometimes like you'll hear like, there'll be a subtitle of 4 Creeks before you actually hear it. It's just like a split second before you hear it. So I didn't want the subtitles to prevent any kind of scares from happening. I mean, I put myself in a dark room, I got all the doors shut, even the dog is out, and I'm listening to this on noise-canceling headphones so that this movie has my full attention, and even then, it wasn't scary, and trying to be able to make out what Lily's saying at certain points in this movie is really hard. Other than that, like the actresses did a good job, especially Ruth Wilson. I think she did a good job. I don't want to rag on her because I think she did the best she could with the scripts. I think the music was good. I think the directing for the most part was good. It's just the writing didn't hold up. I think, and I know like the directing and writing was done by the same person. I don't want to say Osgood should just stick to directing, but I think maybe bring in some help, bring in someone to come in and kind of polish things up or kind of do like a final read through of your script. Because I think with the better scripts, I think Osgood's directing would have made this movie a lot better. Because again, I loved his slow burn on things. I loved how I loved the quietness in this movie. How like we kind of held on moments and shots for a while. Like we didn't just something happened and we immediately jumped to something else. I like the fact that something happened and it's like we hold on it for a while so we can take it in. I liked how like scenes were kind of, you'll have like not entire scenes, but you'll have long moments of scenes on just one shot without any cuts, and I like that. I like the quietness where it didn't feel like you had to constantly have something going on in every single moment. So that helped play into the rising of the tension. It's just unfortunately because of the writing, the tension never went anywhere. There was no payoff. But if there was a payoff, then the directing would have made this even better. So I would say the weakest point of this movie is the writing, the screenplay. The screenplay was not bad. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, let's just go with bad. I was trying to be nice, but yeah, I really don't like the fact that it was building up to one thing and then went in a different direction. I mean, for the most part, if it was building up towards one thing and it stayed with that, I would have said it was too obvious. Like if it was building towards Lily being Polly the entire time, that could have worked. Obviously, it would have been kind of obvious, just the way you set up like earlier moments. So I would have maybe eased off of some of those moments. See, that's the funny thing is that like the horror moments are very subtle. Like the rug being flipped is so subtle, but then all the moments pointing towards Lily being Polly are like in your face to the point where I was expecting that was what the end was going to be. And then when they went in a completely different direction, I was like, all right, that didn't make any sense. Like you didn't put any payment into it, into Lily and Polly being completely different people. So yeah, I just, that was weird. But yeah, it just, I don't know. I feel like I'm just kind of rambling at this point. I think I've already made my point. Good atmosphere, good acting, good sound effects, music, and all that. Just poor writing. And writing more in just the story and not even really the dialogue. Because, like, again, Lily's voiceovers, I really like them. Like, especially like the beginning and stuff like that. Like it's like I wish I had an exact quote, but I don't really want to look it up. But it's really good. Her voiceovers are really well written. It's just the story itself isn't well written. So yeah, this one I would say that I agree with the audience score. This is not a hidden gem. So yeah, there you go. And now with the review done, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about this brand new series that I'm going to try out, the worst of Netflix original. So first off, I want to say that I'm not going into any movie that I'm going to do in this series with any kind of negative bias. I'm not looking at any reviews. I'm just looking at the ratings. I don't even want to see what people say about the movie because I want to go in just completely blind. Because this isn't one of those series where I'm picking out movies that I know I'm going to hate just so I can rag on them. In fact, I am purposely leaving out dramas and romances because I don't really care for those type of genre. So I'm going with genres that I actually like. I'm going to be picking action movies. I'm going to be picking sci-fi, adventure, fantasy, horror, comedy, like genres that I actually like. So I'm not going into this trying to pick out crappy movies just so I can crap on them. So you might be wondering, well, then why are you picking like movies with terrible ratings? For two reasons. One, because Netflix originals that have good ratings, everyone already knows about them. They usually tend to trend, whereas movies with negative ratings, people don't really know about them because no one ever really talks about them. In fact, I have a list right here of like 12 possible movies that I'm most likely going to do for this series. And out of this list, I have only heard of 2 of them. So that's 2 out of 12 that I've heard of. So that brings up to my second point. Like, I'm hoping maybe I can find a movie here that was rated poorly, but is actually a hidden gem and something that, didn't deserve the hate that it got. And maybe this series can bring attention to them. I also just figured that as a writer myself, it might be easier for me to critique, movies that have more of a negative rating, because there's more I can like work with to fix, rather than movies that have a higher rating, because there's really not much that needs fixing. So again, like, I'm doing all this off the cuff. I'm not scripting anything. So hopefully, as I start getting more used to doing these type of movies for this series, you'll start seeing more of my screenplay background playing into playing a part in this. And as I like tell you like what I would do to fix things, because that's what I really would like to do. I would really like to use my screenplay background in my YouTube channel. It's kind of hard to do that for comic book and manga reviews, because that's more of like an art background. I guess you could pick apart some of the stories and stuff like that, but I figure maybe with movies, especially since my focus is more on movies and not on comics and stuff like that, in terms of like my schooling, that maybe I can use some of that. So that's the whole point of this. Plus, it's just something new. Hope you guys enjoyed. And if you guys have any recommendations for Netflix original movies that fit the criteria, and that criteria is, it has to be a Netflix original. It has to have a fictional narrative. So it can't be a documentary. It can't be a stand-up comedy special or anything like that. It has to be a fiction story, and it has to be a fictional narrative. It has to have IMDB score of less than 5 out of 10. And it has to have a Rotten Tomatoes audience score of less than 50%. So if you guys find anything like that you would like to see me do for this series, just shoot it my way. Leave it in the comments. I read every comment. Even if I don't respond to every comment, I read every comment. And if it fits the criteria, I will jot it down on my little note that I have right here, my little list. And eventually you guys will probably see it. But yeah, there we go. So that is that. I am the pretty thing that lives in the house. Unfortunately, this is not a hidden gem, and the audience wins this one. It deserves the low rating that it got. So yeah, we'll see how the next movie does. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope to see you guys next time. Take care, everybody. Later.